Good afternoon, St. Martin. Good afternoon. A lot of people have been WhatsApping me, calling me, how little going on. I have tried to get the message out. 2 o'clock this afternoon. I was going to keep a live feed and I am going to explain what I found in the documents that I received from this tender. It was not an easy choice to make to come and talk about this because there are a lot of things that I'm going to say today that some might not like or some might even feel offended. But at the end of the day, my responsibility is to this country. Having gone through accusations of doing things that you know you didn't do made me more cautious not to come and speak about something that could have very long and serious consequences for persons involved. I decided also because of that reason to be very cautious with what I'm going to say and how I'm going to say it. I will hold on a minute to just see. I notice we are on, we have people. So I want to explain to people of St. Martin how tenders work and what really happens with a tender. You hear a lot of talk on the floor of Parliament. You heard misleading stories on the floor of Parliament. Nobody had access to documents to verify really what was being said on the floor of Parliament. But what is clear though, is that with the documents that I got, this pack here, which is strictly the tendering formats and these very special documents here, these are what we call the evaluation forms, where the companies are evaluated on different criteria and at the end they're also given 40 points for pricing. So in reality, you could get 100 points when you're evaluated if you qualify. And this is where things went, in my opinion, quite wrong, very fast in this tender that took place. Remember, when a tender is done, everybody brings in their prices. And I'm not going to take the piece before the tender, even though it has value in understanding that when a tender is to be done, the department writes an advice and asks permission to tender. That permission is granted by the Council of Ministers. Not by the minister alone, by the Council of Ministers. And this will become very important as we go along. Once that approval is given, a document is then, or an ad is placed in the newspaper telling you when you can pick up your tender documents, when there'll be an information meeting, and when you hand in your tender. So we will pick up from the piece of handing in your tender, because I don't think things went wrong before that. When you hand in your tender, the tender document is, the envelopes are opened in front of everybody that came to hand in tenders, and the prices are read off. They check that the prices are equal on all three, so it's good to go. Once that is done, everyone may take note of all the prices that were handed in. Once that is done, you have a sheet with many names, many prices on it, and that goes per parcel. There were 7 parcels. So you had parcel 1, parcel 2, parcel 3, parcel 4, parcel 5, parcel 6, parcel 7. For each one of those, just to give you a little example, parcel 1 had 14 tenders, which means 14 prices were given in. Parcel 2 had 16 tenders, which means 16 prices were given in. And this goes on this way until you reach to parcel 7. Now, when this is finished, we then go over to what we call the evaluation of the bids. What do I mean with the evaluations? There are two evaluation rounds. First round is we check if you complied with the obligations of documentation. And the obligation of documentation means that there are many documents that the government asks you for. An example, I don't want the company's name to be part of it, but a document like this shows you all of the documents you have to bring in. We are talking about proof of the company's registration with the Chamber of Commerce, copy of an earlier license if you had one, and showing that it was issued, that you paid, for example, by the 2020 extension at the receiver's office. And this document has 14 different things, from a bank statement including the financial capacity of the company, a plan of action, so the work plan, a detailed list of proposed personnel, a list of equipment for execution of works, a bill from GB or so showing your address, that there's a valid work address. Look, this was made because of over the years that people used to tender and then maybe the address on the business wasn't equal to the work address or whatever. These documents are checked in the first round. And then two things happen. You either qualify because you got those 14 documents, or you're disqualified because you didn't have one or more of these documents. Every document must be there. It is clearly stated in the tender document that you will be disqualified. Now, this is where things go wrong very fast. And it's very unfortunate, because I want to show you again, just covering the name of the company. I want to show you that this document, there are 7 signatures at the bottom. This is very important to remember. 7 signatures at the bottom. 7 people, 7 evaluators, including the department head, including the financial controller of the ministry, verified if the documents were completed, yes or no. Now, when we have that in order, you get this. You will get, for example, let me look for one. This is I'm looking for a clean one a little bit, because I've been writing on these documents, but at the end of the day, it should look something like this, where all the companies' names are here. And I want to come closer. You can see either a straight line, which means you qualified, or you will see a DQ, which means disqualified. This is signed off by the acting department head of that time. It is signed off. And behind here are all the papers of the companies that were checked by the 7 signatures. Once again, I do this, I must do this so you understand what I'm going to be saying just now. So once all these 7 evaluators signed it off, we knew, the government knew at that point in time, who qualified and who disqualified. And the reason for their disqualification is clearly marked in this section, where it states you either have it or you don't have it. It's here. The V means you got it. The X means you don't have it. I mean, we can't twist about something like this. It was checked. People were disqualified. And now it becomes dangerous. And now it becomes unfortunate. Because in the 7 that were there, 2 belonged to the cabinet of the minister. Now I understand the minister will say, listen, I want somebody from media to verify, overlook, whatever. 2, that's a lot. But okay, you feel comfortable with sending your 2? You go right ahead. That is the prerogative of the minister. It is not ethical because it's the same minister that is going to approve the advice for the findings. So in reality, if his people sign this off, there should be no reason for him to question it after the fact. That's why they were there. But that's not going to be the story that I'm going to tell you just now. Because after this evaluation stage 1 was done, where this list was made and signed off by the acting department head, this went to the minister. He wanted to know who all qualified and who didn't qualify. Those results caused the minister to come back down the next morning in a fitty mood, slamming the tender document on the table and saying, this document is no good. This document wasn't checked by legal, or this document wasn't this. But the minister forgetting that it was the Council of Ministers' obligation to approve it and check it. But because they don't like to read and they don't do their work, most probably they didn't check the document. And consequently, when those that he thought were going to get a contract were disqualified, he got angry. And he started cussing off everybody. The first one to leave was the financial controller. She said, I'm not part of this nonsense and mockery. She got up, she left, and she sent a very stinging memo. That memo is not going to be part of my discussion today. And that memo goes much further. But I want to show you the consequences of that action. Because the consequences of that action were very simple. All the VROMI personnel left. They opted not to participate anymore in the tender evaluations. So we went from 7 evaluators to 3 evaluators, of which 2 came directly out of his office. Instead of the minister stepping in at that point in time to ensure the integrity of the tender, he opted not to. Because now the ball was in his court. But there are a few things that one must know. You cannot change a tender document by law, just like that. You will need approval of the Council of Ministers to make a change. And if you make a change where somebody can be jeopardized, they have a right to appeal that. None of these things were done. Suddenly, there was a whole new situation that occurred. Suddenly, workers of the minister's cabinet asked for documents to be retrieved out of a safe location where they were locked up by the then acting head of the department. They said they are here to pick up these documents so that they can be reviewed by the minister or the minister's office or whomever. But the documents left the office. The packages left the office and only returned later. But upon their return, those that were disqualified, some, not all, were qualified. And this is where things really went crazy. Because in the Ombudsman report, there's a passage that, and this was discussed basically on the floor of Parliament a little bit. There were a lot of accusations suddenly about leaking information or sharing information, because on the floor of Parliament, suddenly a few documents were presented by, I believe it was MP Peterson from the PFP party, where hard accusations were made. And there was a whole pushing and shoving going on. But at the end of the day, when this was questioned, the reason given that the people qualified when they were disqualified was because there was a missing box. And in this box, it was misplaced. And in this box had documents. Look, I ain't going to take some Martin people for fools. 7 people checked this document, including the 2 from the minister's office that came back down, asked for documents to be taken upstairs. And then suddenly, the company qualified. The documents are in the envelope. Come on, people, come on. How stupid do you think everyone is? I must give the MP that defended this tender on the floor of Parliament credit for confusing the hell out of the MPs and to an extent the public of St. Martin. But not all of us were confused, because I did go through both parcels, 2 and 5, and we're going to address that later, because he was disqualified in both. He was disqualified in both. You see, what happened afterwards is when the qualification aspect for these papers, you realize there are 3 signatures, but this one specifically carried a 4th signature. And we're going to get to that. We're going to get to that just now. Because this is how things go wrong. This is where things went wrong. According to many evaluators, when they started taking the documents, they walked away. And because of this, when they said a box, it became clear to me that something is dead wrong. Because they signed off on the day of receipt of the tender. All documents were checked. They were not put away. They were checked. So how can you have 13 of the 14 documents checked off as received and one of them an X? You know why? Because it wasn't there. And there was no box lost. And there was no box misplaced. What happened is we placed a document into an envelope, into a box. And that's a hard accusation I'm making. But one that I'm willing to explain to all those that know how an investigation has to be done. Because it is crystal clear what happened. Those documents that they have there now, don't be surprised if things start to disappear after what I said today. That when they go and look for them, or they can't find them, they have been misplaced. Because that's the way they work. That's the way they work. This created a very sticky situation, naturally, though, for the VROMI workers, the infrastructure management evaluators, the contract managers, the people that knew what they were doing. Because those that came from the cabinet never did an evaluation before. They never did. They had no clue how a garbage collection evaluation should look. They had no clue how a management report should look. They had no clue, for example, how you would look at the list of resources, equipment, value of equipment, how you write off equipment. So points are given just in the wild, not based on actual realities. These are things you must understand make a lot of things murky. Then we go to round 2 of the evaluation. Naturally, like I stated already, at this stage, there were no more VROMI people really involved other than the acting department head, because he couldn't distance himself. But all the contract managers, financial controller, they all pulled away. Remember, Louis Brown wasn't there no more, so there was no sharp eye looking at this cautiously. There was an acting SG that was cautious and doing his thing, but I don't believe personally that he went in depth in these contracts, because he would have seen it. He's a seasoned person with tenders, so he would have seen what I am seeing for sure. You see, it's not about pointing fingers anymore at the contractor or at the VROMI workers. But I need to clear the air with people when they are telling untruths and they believe that they can throw blame by me for things that they are doing. Because I wasn't here when this happened. I was in Parliament. I wasn't part of this evaluation. So we need to be careful. But you see, there are a few things that you have to ask yourself constantly. Because during the evaluations, for every parcel tendered, an evaluation sheet like this is made. One like this is made for every tender. Every parcel, every tender. None of these sheets are in possession of the Ombudsman. Why is that? Why give them an overall that says Company A, 29 points, Company B, 50 points? How did you get to those points? Why made the Ombudsman not see that? Because there are places where you scratch out 1 point and put another point to ensure that certain people get more points so they can get the job? Is that maybe a reason? Maybe not. But maybe yes. Because you are not showing it. You're hiding it. That's the problem. You're hiding. You intentionally tried to mislead the Ombudsman. It didn't work. The Ombudsman caught on. A lot of people asked questions. A lot of people told their story. And the Ombudsman report showed that a lot of things went wrong. An Ombudsman is a high council. They have no reason to worry about a minister. Their concern is the people of the country, not a minister's well-being. And the minister went out and all out disrespect on the Ombudsman because she was digging and she was digging and she was choking and she was pushing for the truth. And they tried their utmost to hide the truth. But in reality, the tender shows different. I'll give you an example. When you read this document, at the bottom it says price, highest bid minus lowest bid is amount X to be divided by the points. Amount X divided by 40 is points awarded per amount X. The linear scale is upwards 7%, downwards 5% for the 40 points. So you get 40 points minus the government price to a linear scale, down 5%, up 7%. Give you an example. Government price is 100 guilders. Downwards would be 95 guilders, upwards would be 107 guilders. They are talking about highest bid minus lowest bid. That can't work because everybody would get 40 points. Because we have bids running from, for example, where the government said it costs 5.4 million, we have bids running from 3.2 million to 13.3 million. It means it's a difference of over 10 million in bids. You cannot apply it. So the linear scale of 95 to 107 would have been applicable. Which means if your price is between 95 guilders or 107 guilders, you qualify. Your bid then qualifies, which means you will get points on this paper. But the only way you can get a paper like this, it means that you qualified in the first round. This is where things go wrong. Because I'll go with you parcel for parcel to show you what really went down. Because a lot of things went down that shouldn't have gone down. And again, I'm not here to blame anybody directly, but I'm here to show what really happened. Parcel number 1. This is, you see, parcel 1. Parcel 1 has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 contractors with a little mark, which means they go to the second round. Of those 5 contractors that go into the second round, nobody qualified within the margins. Nobody. All 5 were either above or below. All. Which means that the 0 points will be given for the price. Now it becomes important to see what happened above here. But if you just give me a total point system, you're telling me, believe me what I'm saying. If I wanted to believe you, I want to investigate you. That's how simple that is, Minister. You think you're going to get a walk in the park today? Start getting your Alka-Seltzer ready. But this didn't only happen here in parcel 1. It happened basically in all parcels. And I'll give you a rundown with what I mean. Because in parcel 1, out of the 14 contractors, nobody qualified for pricing. In parcel 2, 5 companies had a qualifying price out of 16 contractors. But guess what? All 5 were already disqualified with by the government. They didn't have the right documents. So there are companies that qualified, but their price was out of the margins. So they get nothing. They are basically disqualified because their price is no good. Your price got to be in the margins, otherwise your price is no good. And if you're going to tell me up front that from the 100 points you're giving 40 for pricing and you're throwing out all 40 because the margins are wrong, I believe we have a different problem on our hand. Parcel 3, 2 companies had a qualifying price out of 13, but they too were disqualified. Parcel 4, 3 companies had a qualifying price out of 15 contractors. And in this parcel specifically, all 3 had a qualifying price in accordance to the government. You would want to believe that if the price qualifies, so if the government said, I calculate 100, and the 95 qualifies, that you're going to give the 95 the job. Lo and behold, I give the one closest to the 100. So if that was 101 or 99, I'll give that one instead of the 103 or the 95. This is a criteria that I don't understand. This is the criteria I don't understand. Because no place in the reports that we have seen is this mentioned how they got to this very specific criteria. Even more interesting, how did you get to the 5 and the 7 in the sliding scale? 5% down, 7% up. How did you even get that in particular? Because you see, the problem is this. A lot of companies that have been disqualified are companies that have been hauling garbage for 20, 30 years, have trucks, and those trucks, they didn't have to buy new ones. In the cost analysis of the government, it is crystal clear to me that the pricing is based on people buying new trucks and paying a lot of money to cover it off. Let's say they buy a truck for $100,000, $200,000, and they got paid back over 5 years, which means in their calculation, they are going to take a cost of $20,000 or $40,000 per year in the cost analysis. While if I own a company and I own a truck, my truck ain't valued $200,000, it might be valued $80,000. So I am writing off $16,000 a year, not 20 or 40. So the chance that my price is going to be lower than the margins set by the government is extremely big. Instead of looking at that consideration before you go out and do, I'm going to give the price closest to my price, the job, I think you made a blunder. That's not how you professionally evaluate. That's not the way you do it. Again, like I said, the people that gave these numbers came from the cabinet of the minister. There's no Vromi signature under here. There's no Vromi signature. The only signature you could find is the one of the acting department head at that time, that after this whole fiasco, gave up that function and said, I can't work like this. I cannot work like this. These are things that haven't been said but need to be said. So we understand the playing field of these games. Parcel 6. One company had a qualifying price out of 13, but was also disqualified. Parcel 7. Nobody out of the 15 contractors had a qualifying price. Let me recap that for you in one sentence. There were 14 prices handed in out of the 103 prices that were within the range that the government said we are going to accept as a valid price. That's about 13.5%. I mean, look, a few questions come to mind by someone like me. Who did the price calculation for the government, and was this price verified by anyone? The reason I ask so, and with no disrespect to anybody and no pun intended, those that have done these contracts before and made these calculations before, because it's not the first time. We had in 2016 when we did these contracts, Minister Myers had his financial expert sit and review together with people like Edelmira Janssen, Mark Williams, myself. We together evaluated, there was 5 of us, we evaluated it and we reviewed it like the way I'm telling you. Right now, there is a newer crew in contract management at VROMI. I wasn't there anymore, but more importantly, Lewis Brown wasn't there. Lewis, who is well aware of how this works, who would have been able to see through mistakes and say, no, you're doing this wrong. Because the SG signs the findings and the awarding advice proposal to the minister. The SG signs it, and he will go through that advice with a fine-tooth comb. Because in 2016, we did make mistakes evaluating, and we gave, instead of putting 9 points, we put 0 points. The person doing the digital work pressed the 0 instead of the 9. Thank God, Lewis Brown found it, and the parcel was awarded to the right contractor. There was nobody outside given work that tomorrow you'd have to say, I have to call back in that work. This is the value of having professionals looking at the work. So the question is, who verified these prices? Were there any price adjustments made after the tender? Did we say, okay, we're going to drop this price, we're going to make it so much, or we're going to make it so much? Were the numbers known to the minister before the tender? I think the minister should be able to answer those questions. Did he know the tender price before it was tendered? Did the ministry give him the pricing? Because when we were there, we were very cautious with it, so to prevent any shadow and any crazy statements being made. We made sure that we were very careful how we would share things, information, etc. But again, not going to blame anybody for anything with that. I'm just asking the question. Was the cost calculation for pricing done with the present available budget or not? So normally, when we make a tender document, we keep in consideration if the government has the money to pay for what they want. Because we always want a rose garden. We want a Mercedes-Benz. But we can only afford a Skoda. When that happens, you then get things that go haywire altogether. Because we are putting out things that we cannot pay for. And that happened in this tender. That happened in this tender. Over 1.5 to 2 million had to be looked for by the Minister of Finance to make this thing payable. While clearly in the documents, contractors with a higher price that didn't qualify for the price were given the job because they were closest to government. But it is clear when you review all these documents, and I know the media has the documents, so please, you all can use it digitally, upload them and show the people. You will realize that haulers with 20, 30 years of service with a lower price were not given the job. A lower price of maybe 50,000 guilders over 5 years, 10,000 guilders a year, 1,000 guilders a month, a little less. But they were not given the job. And the question is why? Why would you want to pay 50,000 extra? Why? I know what some of you are thinking, but I will not say that on air. I also need to understand, how was the sliding scale determined 5% down, 7% up? Is that a standard that is being used in the ministry? Maybe it's a standard used not by us. We didn't know it, because when we look for sliding scales, we would look at the type of tender it is, because there isn't a one shoe fit all. When you are dealing, for example, with manpower, you're very careful with allowing the price to go down, because when we run a calculation, we run it, for example, at 12 guilder 50 per hour per man. So we are not going to allow you to run it at $5 because that's minimum wage. We are very cautious with how much we allow the price to go down. These are the type of things that when you create a sliding scale, you keep consideration with. And the same goes with how much do you allow it to go up. Because some people buy new equipment, others use existing equipment. So that's where the sliding scale plays. But clearly, it was not thought out. I think it came in after the fact. I don't believe, because I couldn't find it, but maybe I'm wrong and I will stand corrected. I could not find the sliding scale with 5% and 7% in the tender document. I couldn't. I really couldn't, but maybe I oversaw it. I overlooked it. I don't know. But these are the type of things that I'm saying. Because if we had said it was 8%, a lot more people would have qualified. If we say 8 up, 8 down, a lot of people would have qualified. Or 10 up, 10 down, a lot of people would have qualified. But we didn't do that. Because you see, while we always state in the tender that the most economic price doesn't automatically win, is because if the job is 5 million and you come with 2 million, I'm not going to give you the job because I know you cannot do it for 2 million. But if my budget is only 2 million, then you have a problem. Because then that tender that you did for 5 million is way out of reach. Then you should make a tender for 2 million. And that's why I'm asking the questions. Why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? My grandchildren want to get in the video, but it's too serious to bring them in now. You see, these are the type of things that we need a better understanding on. And that's why this video, this podcast today. But to show you, it doesn't stop really there. Because here comes the part that I am trying to wrap my head around. Is the part of how government decides to grant the parcel to contractors whose price was closest to the government price, but clearly not the best price in the interest of the country. And here again, I'm going to give you an example based on, I think it was parcel 1. I think this is the Phillipsburg parcel. There were a few prices that qualified. The government's price was 9,779,844 guilders and 18 cents. That was their calculation. There were 3 contractors that brought in a price that qualified, or let me rephrase, a price that was reasonably close to the price of the government. One of them was 9,089,755 guilders and 60 cents. The other one was 9.2 million, so 9,209 guilders, 976,060 and 6 guilders, and the third one was 9,038 guilders, 38,311 guilders and 20 cents. Those are the 3 prices that are closest to the 9.7 million. Out of those 3 prices, 2 are from existing haulers. One that didn't haul the last 5 years, and one that did haul the last 5 years. One was a newcomer, but had a very competitive price with an extremely good track record of cleaning the country. Those 3 prices were none within the range that the government had predetermined with its sliding scale. Why would you take the highest out of those 3 prices and grant the contract? he didn't qualify. None of the three qualified qua this. So if you then look at the pricing, there are a few questions that will come to mind. Do these people have good experience that they know they can work more efficient? Was the government price actually correct? These are things that if you don't review internally and run a second look at this, you're going to have a problem. Because in reality, with exception of Parcel 4, nobody got points for their price. 6 parcels, if everything was done clean, should have gotten based on this. And it means if you wasn't qualified, you couldn't be on this. I'll put my last dollar that I have in the fire that didn't happen. Because one of the companies that was disqualified in the first round suddenly was qualified in the second round and got a parcel. That is factual. The paperwork doesn't lie. The contracts that were signed don't lie. And again, like I stated, in round 1, 7 people, including the acting department head and the financial controller, signed off on these things. So again, I'm just trying to show you what truly went down. You know, you got to understand that when you look at the second round evaluations and you look at the ombudsman report that they couldn't get these papers, it begs to ask the question, why not? Why would the Council of Ministers not instruct the minister and his department, his ministry, to turn over all documents to the ombudsman? Why wouldn't they do that? Was there a conflict of interest someplace? Were people involved that have been affiliated with members of the Council of Ministers? You see, this is the danger. This is where nepotism, friends and family take over, and the value of country St. Martin is thrown down the garbage bin. And if I'm lying, please, Council of Ministers, prove me wrong. I challenge you publicly. Because you all lie too much. And when I pack all you up, the only thing you could jump on, he can't take his seat, don't vote for him. That's not the point right now, Madam Prime Minister. Look in the mirror before you answer what I've asked. I beg of you, be very careful this time around. I have put this out here so that every man and every woman in St. Martin knows what really went down. It is extremely interesting to find out which criteria was made by whom to approve the disqualified. Because you see, evaluators can't do that. And this is the danger with the evaluations. I want to pull a tender, a parcel that it happened and it was so ugly. This one here, Parcel 5. There's a company in here that was disqualified because they didn't have all the documents. I don't think the name is important, but I think it's clear. You see the X there. 7 people signed it off. 7. All 7 signed it off. The 2 from the minister's office, the department head, the evaluators from Vromi, and the financial controller from Vromi. All signed it off. That same company now suddenly gets 10 points for all the tender documents because they qualified. In the first one I showed you, they didn't qualify. Because where it says missing of any documents of the Torah, zero. So over here, they were disqualified. It's written on this sheet, signed off by the acting department head. Here, you have an evaluation sheet that the ombudsman can see. And they're evaluated. And then you start to get these type of things. A 2 becomes a 3. A 4 becomes a 5. So you start to give extra points. Because this one got to go through. This one got to pass at all costs by the hook or the crook. That's what this is showing. That's what this is showing. And for me, it's not about the contractors again. It's about what went down and how it went down. And then they walk around talking about how good they be and how they're working for the country and they can do it and they can help you and they stand by you. You qualified man, or if I had so much of people, they ain't funny no more. But I don't want to get off track with this one here. The mere fact that the advice written by the department was not signed for approval by the financial controller, but was signed as seen by the financial controller with an attached memo that stated, among others, that because she was not part of this evaluation anymore, she cannot verify, not justify the authentication of such. Now, when you read that, if bells don't go off by the Council of Ministers, by the governor and others, then something is wrong. Something is very, very, very wrong. But most probably is the financial controller didn't like him either. So the ombudsman didn't like him either. The financial controller took it so that she eventually quit that ministry because of all the corruption going on with this present minister. That's why she left. Because she's holding a very high position right now in Curacao in the Ministry of Finance. So qualified she is. And I have had my differences with this good lady, you know. Me and her used to bang heads because I am very straightforward in my thinking, and I believe if it is 6 plus 2 is 8, I don't see why I can't use the 8 from here to fill here as long as I keep my budget neutral. But there are rules, and sometimes you bang heads for it. And all respect to the lady, I have a lot of admiration for the lady and respect for her knowledge. But it is unfortunate the lady walked away because not only did we lose Louis Brown, you know, we lost Mac Williams, we lost Sherry Kelly. These were all powerful people in the ministry, powerful in the sense that their integrity was not questionable. It wasn't. The minister wants to make a lot of things about questionable integrity. The one that has a questionable integrity is the minister. And this tender proves it true and true. And I'm sure that by the papers I've held up, a lot of people are going to figure out just now, because they're going to go and check numbers and all those things. They're going to find out who the persons or the companies are. And I didn't mention it, so I don't feel in any form or fashion responsible for what comes out. But across the board, in all of these evaluations, all of this, there are so many discrepancies. There are so many questionable decisions that you wonder, you honestly wonder, how could the government have closed their eyes to this atrocity? Because it's the Council of Ministers that approved it and sent it to the governor. And if you send the governor a package of documents that look good because they were modified to look good, then the governor will most probably not know what he was truly reviewing and handling. And that's very unfortunate because I have an utmost respect for the former governor. I grew up with him, I know him well, so I know his integrity is one of those that I would never ever dare question in my life. But that he was misled, that is crystal clear. This tender has costed the government millions additionally per year. Per year. You must understand that if we had done this correctly, better, I think we would have a much more manageable garbage collection service where friends and family didn't play a role in the decision making of the contracts. Clearly, when you look at what's happening out there right now, it is clear that the department has no authority to give fines, no authority to give warnings, because when you see how the haulers are collecting, sometimes they got to boys them in the bin in slippers, throwing out the garbage because the truck ain't functioning. Or you got grabber trucks picking up garbage. I mean, we need to be honest. The contract, the terms of reference do not allow that. The fact that it's happening means that either the boys and girls ain't working, which I sincerely doubt, or they may not give warnings unless the minister approves it. The latter, I believe, is to be the truth. But I believe that I have told you all now what it is. I know the Council of Ministers ain't gonna touch this with a 100-foot pole, because they know if they go here, this is gonna bust open Pandora's box. Let me thank all of you for your attention. And if anybody needs information on this matter, I'm always available to show you what I received and what it is. Again, I just want to show the public of Samarkand that you're going to the polls on the 11th of January. And yes, this is political. You're going to the polls. Know who you're electing. Know who you're electing. They had a lot to say about me, but like I said, Michael Jackson sang one of the greatest songs for politician, Man in the Mirror, Woman in the Mirror. We need to look at ourselves before we call a spade a spade. We need to look at ourselves before we criticize others. And I said in the beginning of this podcast, I thought long and hard before I did this, because I have been down the road of being accused and even convicted for doing something I never did. So I understand the implications. I truly do. But I believe the people of Samarkand have a right to know who is truly the face behind the face. Because sometimes we can be smiling. There are contractors that are being told, don't worry, man, next year the contract's due. We're going to fix you up. No, man. You're not going to be there to fix nothing anymore. Because your fixing has destroyed contractors and companies that had many young people working an honest day's living. The boys in town, the boys in Belvedere, the boys in KL, all them get rough up and mash up. Not because they made a wrong tender, but more because, let me leave it to that. Have a good day. Take care. I'm going to be in Belvedere tonight with our rally. Hope to see you all there.